Welcome back. Today we are joined by Stanislav Krapivnik, a former U.S. Army officer from Donbass, and since his army service, returned back to Donbass. So, thank you for coming back on the program.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
So I get the impression the NATO-Russia proxy war keeps escalating, and we're moving towards very dangerous terrain. One of the things or developments we've seen lately is the amount of drones which are being used to overwhelm the Russian air defenses, and the Europeans especially do not shy away from essentially bragging about how they're contributing to this. And a lot of this is also, of course, intended not just to overwhelm their defenses, but also to do these deep strikes within Russia. And again, putting no secret that the target is Russia's energy installations, among other targets. I was wondering, how do you see the situation?
I'm going to say a few words that are probably some people are going to think are overblown, but they're not. And I've spoken with various military officials. Look, we're entering by mid to late summer, if there's not a ground war already going on, considering everything the European Union is about to be hit with, including starvation, at least in the lower classes. We are going to be entering a zone of possible nuclear war, and I'll explain why. Right now, Russian. I'm not going to say how many targets the Russian system can, the Russian anti-aircraft systems can handle. That's state secrets. I know approximately, but I'm not going to mention. But we'll say that right now it's well within manageable scopes. True, some things get through, or what happens is Russia's a very big country. It can't cover everything. They'll find occasional corridors to go in and strike with that. A lot of I just came back from the Donbass Monday night, so. Yeah, it's some of you pass some of these oil facilities. They've got netting up. They've got everything up. So they're climbing that ladder of defensive ladder. But the job here for the EU that it set out for itself, and it's quote defensive alliance, because I mean, what says you're just helping Ukraine, then we're in a military defensive alliance. But we're not really part of this war, is to well overwhelm Russian defensive systems and the production rate that they can maintain in new systems and missiles by several fold with these strategic drones. And then what? And then take out, as we've seen attempts before done, the Russian radar systems, early warning radar systems, and possible strategic assets such as strategic bombers, strategic bombing command, and maybe go after nuclear submarines in port and so on. So what you're going to have is you have a nuclear superpower, blind, facing off against the U.S., which is fully involved. I mean, Trump just signed another giveaway to Ukraine of 1,500 JDAM kits, extended range, which is still only 80 kilometers, but still. You have a nuclear superpower, blind, with a threat to at least part of its nuclear deterrence, facing off against another nuclear superpower and its European proxies, who has a first strike first strike doctrine. The logic behind here for that blinded superpower is to strike first. I don't know what's coming. I know the other guy has a doctrine to hit me the moment he thinks he can get away with it. The only logic left here is to strike first with everything and exterminate the enemy, because tomorrow I might not be able to do it. That's the logic we are now in, or at least heading into. And if the Europeans don't have enough brain power to stop themselves, there will not be a Europe. There'll be a nuclear desert in the Northern Hemisphere. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised by the lack of restraint, because I remember when first Yeah, Russia's radar systems, that is the early warning systems that's supposed to warn against a nuclear strike, has no purpose in the theater of the Ukraine war. When it was hit, was, you know, barely mentioned in the media. And I had on Ted Postol, the MIT professor, also advised
Hmm.
the Pentagon, and he was making the point how outrageous this is, how extreme. Like the only purpose for doing this, the only way they could do it was with the assistance of the U.S. And the only purpose for striking this is to enable a U.S. nuclear first strike. And then, of course, as we saw in June of last year, the hitting of the nuclear triad of the Russian Federation. I mean, this is incredible stuff. This is, yeah, my concern is this is pushing Russia to take a more offensive approach. That is, not wait until the first strike comes.
Right.
But what?
Well,
Yeah, sorry.
there's one other approach. I'm sorry uh, there's one other approach, and that's as a first strike on a conventional weapon scale, with, for example, with the Russians, to take out the factories that are manufacturing these drones. Sure, it may mean war with all of Europe, but it doesn't mean a nuclear first strike.
But how serious do we know the Kremlin is taking this, though? That is the threat to its nuclear deterrent, because this is the you would think that alarm bells would be going off, but how serious do they take it? And um, I guess what would be a proportional response here, because nobody wants all-out nuclear exchange.
Well, no, nobody wants a full-out nuclear exchange. They just want a one-sided nuclear exchange. That's America's policy of first strike. We exterminate you before you can respond and then try to get us back, and then whatever comes in, it's not going to be enough to really destroy us. So we'll come out on top. That's the American approach. It has been in the '60s when Kennedy came in and that was proposed to him. That was that and it's never gone away. Now it would be much less dangerous if the U.S. had a second strike only policy, the way that China and Russia has. That would be, by the way, I think India and Pakistan also have that position. So they're both nuclear powers that have fought wars and just fought another one, but they have a sane second strike uh, doctrine. They're not going to be the first to launch. U.S. doesn't. So the logic again of anybody that faces off with the U.S. is don't wait for him to hit you, even if that's not your policy. Hit him first, particularly if you're blinded, if you're being blinded. So there's that policy, and there was a study done about 15, 16 years ago on how many nuclear strikes by key targets, how many key targets in the U.S. would have to be destroyed to turn the U.S. into a medieval economy. It probably shatter the country for 100 years, or possibly politically shatter forever. Take a wild guess. How many targets need to be hit?
I would know.
47. 47. That's your key cities, your key nuclear power plants, your key oil and gas facilities. There's only 47 spots that need to be taken out, and the U.S. is done. Economically, it's done for the next 100 plus years. Its key population decision making and manufacturing centers are gone. Its key industry areas are gone. Its key logistic areas are gone. Russia may have more than 47 just because Russia is much, much bigger in size, about 2.5 Americas. But the point is in a high-tech society, high-tech economy, they're really actually very fragile. While in medieval times, every village had a smith, and if you killed a couple smiths, you didn't crash the economy of metalworking because every village and every town had multiple smiths. When you have a Silicon Valley where the majority of the high-tech IT companies and engineers are, you take that out, and that's something that's very hard to come back from when it's been atomized. So it's the same thing. And here's the other problem, too, particularly for the Europeans. Russia's big. Russia's huge. Russia's the biggest country in the world. U.S. is still pretty damn big. Any strikes of a limited character, you're only going to get a certain percentage of the country covered in nuclear fallout or directly destroyed by nuclear blasts. The non-Russian European subcontinent as part of Eurasia. By the way, Russia, if you count in the Donbass, Russia's about 42% of the European subcontinent. Uh, Everybody else is pretty packed in there. So any one strike was going to affect a disproportional amount of people and cities and areas. So even a limited nuclear exchange on the rest of Europe and there'd be giants, if not majority swaths of territory that are no longer habitable or habitable at your own risks. So that's the reality. And I don't think the European officials, the people sure so don't get it. I mean, you remember the 1980s. Medium range ballistic missiles became a thing, and there were mass demonstrations because, all of a sudden it's not the Soviet Union and the US that are going to be doing the exchange. We're going to be the first ones hit. Oh, no, we don't like this. And the crowds came out on the streets, and in the end, the whole class of nuclear missiles, nuclear weapons, was banned. Now we got them back. So Europe is very much going to be the first things hit, and then maybe America.
Yeah, well, there's a weird mass psychosis, I think, in Europe now, though, because if one would warn that, well, perhaps striking the early radar system of Russia, maybe bombing its nuclear deterrent, that is, maybe this is risking World War III. And a nuclear exchange, the usual comeback, because I have warned about this many times, the usual feedback is, well, Ukraine has right to defend itself. This is pro-Russian talking points. Yeah, so there's an immunity now towards common sense. This is the fallback of all things. That is, you just have this binary option. Either you support the Russians or you support the Ukrainians. And supporting Ukrainians mean you don't discuss risks such as nuclear war. And it's impossible to challenge this, essentially. So it's a very dangerous path we're in, and this is often an argument that's being made also by a common guest on my program, the former CIA director for Russia analysis, which is George Beebe, that the Europeans are really trapped now in narratives. There's no strategic thinking anymore. It's just sloganeering, and everyone locked themselves into very destructive positions. But besides going after the Russia's nuclear deterrent, we see that a key objective is, of course, these energy installations, so refineries and everything else. How significant is this? Because now, with the more long-range strikes deep into Russia, NATO obviously assisting Ukraine to try to overcome some of the Russian air defenses. How big impact this is having on Russia's energy industry?
It's having some impact, but we've seen that. Well, first of all, a lot of what it's hit normally is not key infrastructure. I mean, if you look at an oil refinery, it's a huge facility. Your average oil refinery is somewhere between 3 to 5 kilometers long and has hundreds of kilometers worth of pipes. So what's normally being hit, and I passed one of these tank farms that part of it had been burned, the rest had been saved, is you're usually hitting storage facilities because they burn really, really bright and they make really good pictures for Western media. Look, it's burning, ha ha ha. If you hit the pipes are under pressure. They're monitored by computer systems. Valves cut off the pressure if pressure drops, and they don't burn. Yeah, they take a bit more to replace, but we've seen that the Russian economy, the Russian industry is fast enough at replacing them. It's a little harder if you get certain vessels damaged. They may take, depending on the size of the vessel, they may take anywhere from a week to a couple of weeks to replace because they're all welded and designed and welded by hand. But for the most part, there hasn't been that big of a damage. These last couple strikes were more vicious, especially on the Black Sea coast, Tulsi was they hit pretty hard, and they still, it was majority of the damage was storage facilities that exploded, and then what we saw in Iran, the same thing on the Black Sea coast, mass pollution, oil spilling out, and spilling carcinogenic ash coming down. But it's overall, it still hasn't reduced, and it won't reduce the Russian production. Um, and what it is doing, though, is it's accelerating Russia's move to facilities in the east of Russia, uh, centered toward Europe. I mean, I'm sorry, toward Asia, not Europe. Basically, Asia is, well, Asia and other locations are going to be the ones that are going to be the key ports for energy. Europe is, the EU, anyways, is been cut off one direction or another. And technical problems on the Druzhba for Mirts is just another hit in the I guess maybe if not in the heart, then maybe in the spleen. But it's gonna hit them hard. So, but what the effect it does have is it further drives up the cost of oil on the market, and especially the spot market. And the Europeans are pretty much buying off the spot market. The EU Europeans are buying off the spot market right now. So it just makes it more expensive for them. So in supporting, as you said, they're in lockstep. No matter what they damage, they do themselves. The level of ignorance or self destruction at this point is beyond any comprehension. So no matter the damage they do to themselves when they're supporting Zelensky, and Zelensky's trying to strike at that, he's trying to strike at South Stream or Turk Streams, the pumps pushing gas in the Southeast Asia, I mean Southeast Europe. They've struck multiple times the Caspian Pipeline Authority, which is 50% owned by Chevron and 50% owned by Kazgas, or Kazoil, I'm sorry, in this case, Kazakhstan's oil company. And it's cost them something like $9 billion lost revenue over the last half a year. So it's huge money. So they're, number one, they're driving up the cost on the markets, which is again going to hit Europe hardest of all. And if they do manage to damage hard enough hits and take out the Turk Stream gas line, for one, it's of course it's going to be a major hit on the Turkish economy. So that's going to make the Turks just really, really happy. And two, it's going to be a major hit on the southeastern European economy. That's the outside of LNG from the U.S. That's about the only gas they have left coming in. They've managed, even before the Gulf War with Iran, they had been managing to piss off UAE and other countries with the third packet and everything else that they were demanding. So, at this point, it's self-destruction, but they're going for it. They can't stop themselves, as you said. They really can't stop themselves. And I didn't finish answering the last question that you asked. I can't speak for the civilian leadership in the Kremlin, but the military is looking at this very seriously, seriously enough to discuss nuclear first strike, I think. And definitely strikes on the drone plants inside of the rest of Europe, even if it risks a conventional world war. Well, at this point, it's still better than a nuclear exchange.
Yeah, well, on another escalation which might come sooner would be the threat by Zelensky to strike the 9th of May Victory Day parade in Moscow. And I saw that Zakharova, she made a comment that if the EU doesn't rein back or will put Zelensky under control and this attack actually goes through, then she advised the different European leaders, their embassies, to evacuate Kiev immediately because the retaliation would be kind of immense. How do you think this is just Zelensky trying to sow uncertainty and I guess bring Ukraine back into the news, or do you think this is something he might actually carry out?
The first does not negate the second. Of course, he wants to be at the head, and I think at this point, I mean, look, you're number one. It's always hard to tell how much the crackhead is in charge and how much the Americans and the British are in charge, particularly the American CIA and then the British in general. The American CIA is on destroy Russia mode, no matter what it costs. They're also, I think, very much locked into this very destructive mode, and definitely the British. They're all in, even to I think the possible extermination of England. These people have lost sanity a long time ago, and the British people had better wake the hell up because they may be lost with them. In all possible nuclear exchange one day. Not that England exactly has anything to exchange with. Even the missiles are not their own, and neither are the Typhoon submarines. They're all rented from the U.S. Uh, would he do it? I think he would. I'm going to be there. Not quite there. I'm going to be off to the side with RT as a commentator on 9th of May. I was there last year also. So if anything happens, I'll be there on location, close enough, anyways. The parades are downscaled, and it's not because of the threat. There was a lot of criticism in 2023 the size of the parade because the country is at war, so we need to save money and to cut on some of these grandiose ceremonies. 25 in 2025, it was a big parade because of the 80th anniversary. So this year, as far as I know, the parade is not going to have any ground tech. So none of the tanks, none of the rest. It's all going to be basically a marching parade. They can still march a hell of a lot better than what the Americans put together. So we remember that shameful example. Would he strike? I think he'll try. Another question is, there was comeback from the military side, Russian military side, that said we'll just wipe out the center of Kiev, and they could very easily. They can Gaza Kiev, and that's what I don't think anybody remembers. They see what the Israelis are doing to Gaza. And they support it. I mean, come on, as Merz said, yeah, they're just doing the dirty work that for us. The extermination of those little ugly people that we don't like. They forget that Russia is quite capable of Gaza and Berlin, or London, or any other city in Europe. It's got the missile capabilities, and they can do it. So we'll see. We will see. I think they will try it. They're not that smart, or they're that desperate. It's hard to tell. Or they, I think, partially, and it's partially the fault of the Kremlin, is they've lost deterrence, or any threat of deterrence, and the West isn't taking it realistically until something happens. And of course, from the Western side of you, look, the Ukrainians are meat. I mean, let's look realistically at it. For the average European, the Ukrainians are dirty Eastern barbaric meat that we're using against the other Eastern barbarians. So who cares if they die? The average European doesn't give a damn about how many Ukrainians die. You virtue signal all day long. It doesn't cost them anything to virtue signal. Oh, look how virtuous I am. We're giving money to those Ukrainians to die off. And pretty soon we'll be sending their men off, gathering them up and sending them off. By the way, according to the Ukrainians, the French have already handed 40,000 people over to them to bussify and get them to the front as fast as possible. So, you're looking at that. Yeah, the Europeans, to the average European, Ukrainians are more of a pain in the arse. And some kind of Eastern savages. They don't care how many of them die off. I mean, let's be realistic about it. The Americans sure as hell don't care about how many of them die off. All they hear is a cha-ching every time a Ukrainian turns into a corpse. And if you can get a Russian, that's even great. It's all cha-ching. It's money in the bank. I mean, beating around the bush and making euphemisms about what they are is pointless. Let's just talk reality. It's horrid. It's brutal. And that's what it is. To the average Western politician and their backers, it's all money. It's just meat for the grinder, and it's all money, and it's never been anything else.
Yeah, I can't help but to notice that every time there's some expression of empathy for the suffering of the Ukrainians, it always translates into sending more of their youth to their trenches. I mean, if there's other issues, things that can't be used for warfare, such as the busification, the Ukrainians being dragged out of their homes and sent to the front, or yeah, any of the sort, then suddenly the empathy is kind of gone. This can't be used in any instrumental way. Um, well, my last question though is just about what do you see currently on the front line? Because it seems well that the Russians are doing quite well in the Donbas region, in Kharkov region, and also Sumy for that matter. But in the Zaporozhye region, we see that the Ukrainians have had some successes, especially over the past week, along the Dnieper there. How are you reading the situation?
Um, Ukraine has successes, but it doesn't have staying power because it gains those successes by using up a lot of people. A friend of mine who was in he was a sapper and he was in storm infantry, and now he is on the cleanup crews that go into the battlefield to remove the bodies. And he was telling me he was in Kupiansk. Kupiansk is in Russian hands. Ukraine's holding some of the forested areas, some buildings on the very edge. When they came in the south to clean up the bodies, what used to be more or less of a static front, back and forth, but more or less of a static front, said, it's 10-1. He was shocked. He thought there would be a lot more Russian dead, but no, it's 10-1. Ukrainians are just losing massive amount of people. And another guy telling me, he was on the front line uh, in Kharkov, and they had a 2 kilometer open fields between their high ground positions and the line of contact. And the Ukrainians would just drive up, unload a bunch of infantry. And I was talking with him how the infantry was moving, and it's obviously infantry absolutely was not trained. Basically given a rifle and go forward and just throwing his body away. He said, we barely ever fired on them. The artillery would chew them up before they get halfway across that 2 kilometer field. I mean, a 2 kilometer field to charge across is huge. Close combat is 50 meters and closer. And 2 kilometers, if I can see you at 2 kilometers in a modern military setting, you're never getting to 50 meters. How cut you down with between heavy artillery, between mortars, between airdropped munitions, and then going into direct fire from tanks that are being used as basically infantry support vehicles. Anything else, heavy machine guns, you're never making across that field. Never mind landmines or anything like that, mundane stuff like that. It's so he said, like I was saying, yes, over and over again, they're just some body waves. There's corpses laying on the ground, rotting. These guys and Russians won't go out and pick them up anymore because they did that in Zaporozhye when they had the big 23 counteroffensive. Russian troops would go out there, pick up the wounded Ukrainians, and the Ukrainian artillery would use that as for targeting on Russian soldiers. So, after a couple of the artillery ambushes, while the Russians are trying to save the lives of the Ukrainian wounded Ukrainians, just left them out there to rot, to bleed out and die. What are you going to do? You're not going to risk your own guys when you're dealing with people like that. But the main thing I've seen is from this trip is the reorganization of Russian drones. Russia has gone down drone units. Ukraine was ahead of this, and Russia's finally catching up. Russia had when Russia went into the FPV drone. I'm talking FPV level drones. So you've got different missions on FPV drones. You have reconnaissance missions. You have kamikaze drone missions. You have bombing drone missions. You have supply drone missions, and a lot of it uses different types of drones. Never mind communications, things like that. Well, every battalion, every company had its own drone section. That so they were disorganized. They were organic to whatever company plus level unit that they were in. So different levels of training, different levels of equipment, different levels of everything. They're all being reorganized now. They've been stripped out of all of these other units, and they're being formed into drone battalions. And these are separate now from the anti-aircraft air defense drone battalions. So the anti-drone drones units are now separate and categorically inside of air defense organizations, regiments, battalions, and these are going to be the offensive, but now they're being specialized. So you've got new schools opening up in just inside of Russia, and closer to the battlefield, the units are opening up their own schools because as many people are going through, they need more. And now they're being standardized. A lot of it's being standardized, though there are development. I mean, I was in one of these labs that they are developing their own drones or modifying their own drones. And whenever Ukrainians toss out a new idea, they just bring it down and they take it apart and remodify it and move on with new models. So they have a limited capability of developing their own drones, plus what's coming in from centralized manufacturing, and it's all going into a very professional organization. And they've got plenty of candidates signing up.
Actually, before I forget, I wanted to ask you as well about Russia's activities now in Africa, or more specifically Mali. It doesn't really pop much up in the news. How would you, I guess, how would you give an overview of what is actually happening there in terms of the fighting?
Pretty much an abject failure. They try to do the Syria scenario. I've got to look up some of the names of. I did a report on it, but I'm horrible with names. Let's see. The president of Mali, Assimi Goata. I'm probably butchering his name. I do that. He's the difference between him and Assad. You know, Assad turned away from Russia, then he turned away from China and Iran. All three were offering to upgrade his military, just open your economy, let us invest, which would have brought jobs in too. He wanted to be loved by the West, so he went and got loved by the West. He was trying to cozy up with the Saudis and the and UAE to get back in the grace of the U.S., and he really got in the grace of the U.S. What can you say? El Jelani now runs that part of my French, a shit show. There's a big difference here. The Malians didn't have this kind of problem. Russia, African Corps, which is formerly Wagner, which is reorganized and has added Russian additional personnel. This is part of the Russian Ministry of Defense. This isn't a mercenary company. These are Russian regulars. They have been rebuilding the Mali military, upping its capabilities quite a bit, and we've seen that. So 12,000 bikers, something out of Mad Max, the Road Warrior, come charging in on technicals and on bikes, 2 guys per bike. You figure it's a lot of money. These were both Islamic jihadists and Tuareg nationals that wanted independence. But the problem is the Tuaregs, who are supposedly secular, are now fully in bed with the Islamic jihadists, which really turned the Tuareg people in the north against them. So they come charging in from the desert, trying to do a blitzkrieg. Additionally, I mean, it's obvious there were elements inside the Mali government that betrayed the Mali government. I mean, the hit squads with suicide bombing were led right to the Minister of Defense, who and his family were killed, and other strikes inside the capital city of Bamako. So what you got here, Gaata, they started having photos of him. He's a colonel, he was a colonel in the Malian army when it was ruled by the French through black hands instead of white hands. The Neo-French Empire. He's taken power, and what did he do? He armored up, got his assault rifle, and he's off trying to control what's going on. So he's not running. and that's the point is what Assad did. He's not running. The malign forces aren't running, and the Russian military was the axis on which everything else was pinned to, and they stood and fought. There's they took that city. The Islamics took the city of Kadal, which is in the capital, which is basically the capital of the north. The Russian and Mali forces moved out to the south to a base there, and then the Malian government coordinated through negotiations to evacuate them out. But apparently, there's still checkpoints and bunker systems up north of the city. They're still being held by Russian forces. One of the problems for this Mad Max assault is they have no artillery. They have no drones. They have no staying power. They are what would be otherwise called flying columns. Flying columns can do a lot of damage because they can get in fast, but they're light infantry at the end of the day. They can get in fast, they can do a lot of chaos, but the moment the lines stabilize, this is what we saw in Kursk Oblast. They could get in deep, they could cause a lot of trouble. They couldn't really take any built-up areas, and the moment the lines stabilize, they just get exterminated because they'll blunder right into some fixed positions that are just waiting for them in ambush. And it's the same thing we saw with the Mercs and the Ukrainian regulars. They just get wiped out, and then the flying column ended because now the lines are stabilized, and the lines stabilized pretty quickly. Plus, not only have the Russian military and the Malayans have the artillery, they also have the aviation. So you have a lot of Me-24s coming in there with rocket pods on them. They're just laying waste to the jihadists. On top of that, there's a drone section that Russia set up for the Malaysian army, and they're doing very good work on that. They're taking these guys out left and right with kamikaze drones, and they've got very little they can do about it, particularly because they're in a very open country. And what was interesting too is even in Bamako, they scattered once they got crushed, and their raids came in and got crushed. They scattered, and the locals hunted them down and killed them, and then burned them. They pulled their bodies together. I mean, I've seen a lot of videos. You can't really put them on YouTube for obvious reasons, like getting banned. But they'd pull these corpses together, chop them up. I guess some of them were taking prizes, but they put all these corpses together, pile them up with trash, and burn them because these people are trash to them. And there are dozens upon dozens of these bodies. So they've been destroyed, and Kadal's getting basically surrounded now. The latest news is some of these bands were asking for green corridors to leave. I highly doubt the Malian army is going to let them leave. So what? They can come back another year, 2 or 3 years again? No. But the point is not that these guys came in. That's not a surprise. It's who's backing them. They, buying bikes, motorbikes, and technicals, which are Toyota trucks. Toyota makes a lot of money off of feeding war all over the world. They never know where their trucks are going, as they sell them hundreds at a time. Yeah, you're gonna love that. But buying all of that, equipping all that takes a lot of money, and Ukrainians are involved. In fact, they're stupid enough that they posted photos of themselves with these jihadists and their jihadi/Ukrainian flags, and they posted all over the internet to show how good they are. So if there's any doubt that this is not a homegrown event, this is an invasion just like Syria was, there you go. And the interesting thing is Burkina Faso, they sent troops to assist Mali. So Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and Niger was under attack too, something that's not really hitting the news. Russia's in all of these countries. All these countries all three have formed basically a self-defense alliance because they knew the French would be back, and the Americans are backing the French, and the Ukrainian proxies are working directly for their masters. But this is nothing new. Ukrainians are arming any jihadists, cartel thugs from Colombia and Mexico, and so on. These guys, this is they're the American proxy in all of this.
Incredible how, yeah, so suddenly you see this fighting between Russians and Ukrainians from Africa, and yeah, how it's spreading across the world. It's yeah,
Well,
amazing developments. Anyways, I
there's
think any
one
last
thing I want to
thoughts?
add. I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. One thing I want to add to this. Something that's not getting talked about. You see, the French are extremely desperate. First of all, Mali has uranium. Mali has 8 gold mines. Mali has finally started to build up a gold reserve. France has a huge gold reserve, no gold mines. So they're just taking it out from Mali when Mali is part of their neo-colonial empire. Well, Mali, most of Mali doesn't have electricity. Rosatom is in the process of starting to build 3 nuclear power plants for Mali. Not only was this going to give electricity to the people, this is going to have the electricity needed for manufacturing. So Mali is no longer going to be desperate and selling its raw resources. It's not going to be able to walk up the value chain, start processing those resources, maybe even bringing up finished goods. So Mali's going to get rich, or at least a lot richer than it was, off of its own resources. They'll let Western Europeans continue to steal them at rock bottom prices. The uranium that Macron and everybody before Macron was buying, because you have very little uranium in this big rock. You have to chemically bleach it out. But you buy the ore, so it's 99.99% of that ore is just rock, and you bleach out the uranium out of it. Well, the going price on the market is $250 a ton. Just to understand, the French were buying it at $50 a ton. Now they have to pay market value. So, of course, they're pissed off. They lost their gold mines, they lost their uranium mines, they lost their cobalt mines. They've lost a lot by losing this portion as a whole. And there's a threat of everything else going. Madagascar had a revolution, got rid of the French neocolonials. Russia wasn't playing any role in that, but it's catching on that, hey, we no longer have to be under French tutelage one way or the other. We've got a choice. It's something Africa has not had in a very long time. Sub-Saharan Africa, anyways.
Well, thanks for sharing the insights, and yeah, now I'm gonna start following what's happening in Mali a bit closer, because this is gonna have massive consequences.
Yeah. I mean, what we're looking at is possibly, World War II. I'm say World War One. World War One, pretty much there was, the refs fire the flare and everybody charges in with each other. And there were a few other countries that were adding on as the war progressed, like Greece and then Romania and Bulgaria. Well, Romania. But World War II was actually a lot of different small wars that eventually grew into one continuous front line. Because we can't forget the adventures of the Italians, the Japanese, and others were having the Spanish Civil War. They're all part of World War II. We're seeing the same thing. The front line right now is in Ukraine. The front line is in the Persian Gulf, and now the front line is in Western Africa, and it's growing. The number of these front lines. Eventually, they're all going to merge into one big war if this doesn't stop. And unfortunately, I don't see the West stopping. The West is driving this. This is absolutely the West driving this.
I keep hearing the argument we're already in a world war, and yeah, that argument's starting to sound convincing.
It does.